who are interested in holistic health and green living. And the Holistic Moms Network has chapters all over the country. She is passionate about this issue and has been featured in the film Genetic Roulette. And as Lisa said, I think just to facilitate this, we'll have our presentations, and then at the end, we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind if I sit. I don't like too much today. I'm just going to focus very specifically on moms because that's the organization that I represent, and like to think that we're the voice of moms who are interested in a lot of these issues pertaining to natural living. So let's start with why moms matter when it comes to GMO labeling. For starters, 85% of all consumer purchases are made by women. So let's start with that. And then 93% of all food products are purchased by women. So anybody who's in food production needs to be paying attention to what women, and especially moms, are concerned about. Yet, in spite of the fact that women are purchasing these large amounts of products, percentages of products, people still know, by a recent study, more about music, approximately 51% of the population polled, and politics, 45%, than they do about food production, where only 40% consider themselves educated on food production. So there's a very big gaping hole in what we are all aware of in terms of where our food comes from and how it's being processed and grown. Now, with moms and GMOs, I think we got a great introduction talking about a lot of the concerns with regard to health. And moms are definitely well aware of rising rates of allergies and asthma, ADHD, autism, a crisis, if you will, with our children and with our generations that we've brought into the world, and how unhealthy they really are. And many of the moms are concerned about health conditions as they pertain to GMOs. We've heard about inflammation and digestive disorders, and a lot of the side effects, and I'm going to leave all of the health conversation to our other experts, as well as the environmental impact conversations, because that's also something we're very concerned about as moms, about the decline of natural seed, about what it's doing to our environment, and particularly with children, because they're so much more vulnerable to toxins. Their bodies are not as mature physiologically, and they're not as capable of processing toxins in their bodies, and certainly not in their foods. And so moms are very well aware of all of that, I think, and certainly spearheading some of that. What I want to talk about a little bit is just what we see here at Holistic Moms, and we are a national organization representing thousands and thousands of moms across the country. And there is just this incredible outrage among moms with regard to the food production in this country, and with regard to this resistance to labeling, which is something that we have just seen moms rally for across the country. And I think that the big problem that we're not addressing is this massive distrust that we've cultivated in our culture and in our communities with regard particularly to food production. And I think that the entire food industry, those who are farming, those who are producing food products, manufacturing food products, really needs to take heed, because the tipping point is coming, and I will say it's going to come from moms, because they are completely outraged and distrustful with what we see. Now, a recent study showed that 52% of consumers do not believe food companies are being honest about their food production. 52% already. 45% do not believe that the agricultural community is being honest about how their food is being produced. So this is not just the big agricultural companies, the food manufacturers that people are distrusting. This is trickling right down to the farmers. And part of that is, I think, because we have this very large disconnect from where our food comes from. We don't engage with local farmers the way that we used to. And even at farmers markets, we've seen greenwashing. We've seen farmers coming in and insisting on saying, everything's organic, everything's organic. I saw this at my local farmers market, and this guy was unloading lemons with PLU stickers on them and saying, it's all organic and local. And we're like, really? Like, you grow lemons in New Jersey? Okay, great. Yeah, we do stickers inside of number 4. So there's this just incredible distrust. And I think that what moms want, what moms need, and what consumers want is transparency and accountability. We want to know what's going on. We want to know how your food is being grown. We want to know how it's being manufactured and produced. We want to see what's behind the veil. And I just came across a recent study that showed that 69% of consumers, when they are able to see where their food is coming from, when they have the opportunity to visit a farm, to meet with a local farmer, their confidence level raises tremendously about the safety and quality of their food supply. So what moms are calling for is true transparency and accountability. I don't think anyone, honestly, in this marketplace is going to have a leg to stand on if they cannot be transparent about what's in their food supply. If they want to use GMOs, you know, whether you're against it or not, we need labeling. At the very, very least, we need to know that the GMOs have found their way into your food supply. If you want to avoid GMOs, you can't do that without proper labeling. We can look for organics, but as you mentioned, Lisa, that there is just this cross-contamination that is outrageous. I mean, it's almost impossible to contain what's been going on with the GMO permeation in our culture. And so I think that with regard to what we're looking at from a mom's perspective is that labeling and transparency is absolutely essential. I'm going to leave the health concerns to the women.
Young children can really be a tremendous force to move and a target, a helping group to move this discussion forward and take action. As I said, I am a medical doctor, and the focus of what I do is the reversal and the prevention of disease using food as medicine. And I have to say that that my interests lie there, I am often very disheartened and upset that, you know, I think we are, if you take a look at why we are gathered here tonight, there are two reasons. It's because we are concerned that these things that we are eating may be dangerous to our health, and they may be dangerous to our environmental health, so human health and our planetary health. And I get upset when I find that the medical community and the medical establishment is completely checked out regarding any statements or any support regarding these important food issues. I think that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine does support these consumption of non-GMO issues, foods, but they're a very small group. Where is our AMA? And where is our College of Surgeons and American Academy of Pediatrics and all the major organizations that would represent the standard medical academic community? There's never any comment from them. And I just wanted to say this bewilders me. I have a little bit of a suspicion why this is, and it has to do perhaps with funding and with the absence of medical studies and scientific studies that show that these transgenic foods are bad for us and that they cause X, Y, Z specific disease. But the problem is that in order to do, I am as much a scientist being a doctor as the next guy. And I, base my medical decisions on scientific method, as was taught in developing hypotheses and all of that stuff. And the studies need to be controlled studies, and they need to be double-blinded, and they need to be rigorous. But the reality is, who is going to set up studies like that? Monsanto. Okay. In the world of health and medicine, studies that show something cost millions and millions of dollars to create. And nobody is going to create them unless there is a financial interest. And Monsanto has the financial interest. And that's why they create studies that they want to use to their benefit. Unfortunately, the federal government, who can fund studies like this, if they're being persuaded politically to look the other way or follow another path, funding will not come from them either. So what I am left with as a doctor and scientist is I have nothing to base my scientific thought on. But I still pride myself in having common sense. So my scientific common sense tells me that one of the great scientific concepts ever unveiled in human history is The Theory of Evolution by Charles Darwin. And something at my core just feels very bad when I think about the way these foods and organisms have come to be and realize that they violate the very concept of evolution, that these substances that we are being exposed to did not evolve in coordination with biological systems to help us. They were introduced at a point in time with some other agenda. And I've learned as a doctor that whenever you take an allopathic tool and try to solve a specific problem, at the end of the day, it usually doesn't work out. And more so, it has the potential to cause great collateral damage, which is not expected. And I feel that we will be seeing collateral damage, and it will not arrive to us proven by a medical study, and we shouldn't wait for that. We should use our common sense and do what is right to basically protect our health and protect the health of the environment. But that's basically what I wanted to say from my standpoint. I see a lot of people with allergies. Are they due to eating, genetically modified corn? I can't prove that. But I can tell you there are things that we do know that are related to this topic. And this we do have scientific proof of. That the chemicals that are used in association with these GMO products are very bad. A lot of them are endocrine disruptors, they are carcinogens, and in the last, maybe since 2005, there is now a new field of genetic study which is called epigenetics. I don't know if anyone has encountered this. There was a great article in the Smithsonian magazine about 2 months ago about epigenetics. And what this says is that we don't necessarily have to worry about the genes, the actual genes that are being altered. We have to now be concerned with molecules in our environment that appear invisible in the cell, but then come and lock themselves onto the genes that seem normal and control them. And in the Smithsonian article 2 months ago, they talked about endocrine disruptors, such as these pesticides, and the way they can be transmitted through generations of lab animals, of rats, and change the genetic outcome for fertility, even generations and generations into the future. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Weiss, thank you for your time. I think whether it's good or bad, when a doctor says something, we listen, or we should listen, right?
I don't know, I got a lot of friends of doctors that I don't listen to.
All right, our next distinguished panelist, Dr. John Harrington, a chiropractor. He's a nutritionist, director of Sunrise Nutrition in Blairstown, a local boy, which is a nutritional healing center. In John's practice, he focuses on how diet is related to disease and how environmental toxicity impacts our health. So with that, thank you, John.
I'd like to thank everyone for giving me an opportunity to speak. My practice, I am a chiropractor, doctor of chiropractic, and nutritionist. My practice is about 95% nutrition. So I can really see how nutrition and food consumption affects everyone's health. Now, each client that comes into my office has to fill out a daily food journal. So I can see exactly what's going on in terms of their food consumption and how they feel and how it relates to their current health condition. So every day I look at these food journals and they can really pinpoint what's going on with their health, and I can actually see, did they eat corn? Do they eat soy? How are they feeling that day? Do they have any headaches? And so on and so forth. So the system really holds my patients accountable for how they're feeling versus what they're putting into their mouth. And I can tell you, when I look at patients who are eating genetically modified food, and obviously I try to take them off genetically modified food, but I do see whenever they go off the wagon, they're eating genetically modified food, they will have more headaches. They will have more digestive disturbances. It may not be extremely severe, but it's more of like a transient thing that happens. I find, a lot of the chemicals that they use in genetically modified foods actually do have, it is tainted with Roundup. They apply Roundup to wheat before the harvest, and they're doing this more and more. So that's why I think we're also seeing an increased amount of wheat allergies, increased risk of susceptibility to celiac disease, despite not having a genetic way of getting celiac disease. It used to be not very common, but we're seeing celiac disease more and more as time goes on. So just taking in some of this genetically modified food, taking in foods that are high in Roundup or even tainted with Roundup can seem to have possibly even some permanent effects on the GI tract, inflammation, so on and so forth. Many of my patients, I do food allergy testing, so I find that many of my patients, they are definitely becoming more and more allergic to different kinds of foods, definitely to soy. Soy, sometimes the reaction can be quite severe to soy. Also to corn, definitely seeing more and more wheat and gluten. We always see dairy as common allergen. But I'm seeing the allergies more and more. I'm seeing the autoimmune diseases crop up more and more. A lot of Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of different chronic degenerative diseases. So, and if we just look at how genetically modified foods affect the human body, these are foods designed to produce a toxin. In some of the, whether it's the BT pesticide, whether it's Roundup, they're a lot more highly concentrated in the genetically modified food than they would be if we just sprayed them like we normally do. So it's critical to understand that the amount of BT in corn, you're getting up to 1,000 or even more than that times the amount of that particular pesticide in the plant than if it was just sprayed on naturally. And the mechanism of action for these pesticides to the susceptible insects is to destroy the gut lining, paralyze the digestive tract. So if we're getting it in such extremely high amounts, it might not be harmful to us or very harmful to us in the low amounts that we get in normal food. But in genetically modified food, what's it doing to our digestive systems? And that's why we're seeing, or at least a lot of people suspect we're seeing now this increase of people having trouble with wheat, people having trouble with gluten since the onset of genetically modified foods. So this is a really important topic that we can't just let fall by the wayside and just chalk it up to everyone's going crazy with the gluten-free craze. This is a real reality that we really need to take a look at. Roundup is supposedly supposed to be a very easy toxin for our bodies to deal with, but recent research I found out just recently is, they've linked it to obesity, autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, infertility, depression, and cancer. And one of the things that the Roundup pesticide does, which we've seen in pigs, cows, chickens, is to disrupt the intestinal flora in our GI tracts. And this flora is extremely important in our health. Our intestinal flora helps us with digestion, elimination, assimilation of nutrients. Our bacterial flora provide nutrients for our bodies. It helps our immune systems function more appropriately. Our bacterial flora there's a huge connection between our gut and our brain and the formation of neurotransmitters. And there's a lot of scientific research right now going on about the microbiome and how important the bacteria flora is to our overall health. So we're finding that a lot of these pesticides that are being used in genetically modified foods, they are, quote, presumed safe, but they really are not when you really look at some of the research on these pesticides. They destroy our gut flora, they create inflammation to your GI tract, They do numerous things to promote inflammation and degenerative disease. So it's kind of like almost like a little nightmare that is really coming true. So I don't know if I have any other things. I know we all might be a little depressed at the moment.
Well, I don't think we're depressed because we have the non-GMO dinner. All right, well, thank you, John.
Yes.
Very much. All right, the next member of our distinguished panel here is Jeff Hill. He is the director of the New Jersey chapter of the Sierra Club, which works to influence public policy through public education, grassroots political action. Probably you've heard Jeff's name more than anybody else's name here in the hall tonight. Jeff is, I think, the go-to guy when the media wants any perspective on environmental issues, and he has perfected the ability to communicate very succinctly. Thank you, Jeff.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I just, wanted to start out. It's good to be up in the Highlands and what's happening with our governor trying to roll back protections that people in the Highlands here who care about food also should make sure we care to protect the land from the governor trying to open it up to his budget to the bulldozers. So I just want to start off and say that the Sierra Club is the nation's oldest and largest environmental group. And John Muir founded the Sierra Club back in 1892 to protect the Sierra Nevada mountains. But it was more than just a landscape like the Highlands. It was also a way of life that we believe that we needed to commune with nature, especially in an industrial society or an industrializing society. You needed to get out in the fresh air and to exercise and to breathe clean air and drink clean water because it was good for your health. John Muir was a farmer, and he was one of the most successful farmers in California. People may not realize that. He grew fruit and vegetables down in Martinez in the Sacramento River Delta. But he also was an early believer in organic farming. Then again, in those days, that's what it was about. Gene splicing back there is how you fix your Levi's. It wasn't about playing God with your food. But health was always an important part of the Sierra Club. It's outdoor hiking and outdoor activities. It's fighting against polluters. It's cleaning up toxic sites and saving open space. And so that's why I wanted to bring that up, because this is an important part of that, because what we eat is a major part of it. We look at this issue a little bit differently than some of the other groups, because yes, there are many health impacts. We don't even know what they are, and we're a believer in the Hippocratic Oath, which is do no harm. And what we don't know can and will hurt us at some point. But the other part of GMOs that I think people don't understand or get as much is the impact that it has on our landscape. Because one of the things that we see is that, and I'll use an example in California, because we diverted rivers and we played around with nature, we see land that used to be very good for agriculture become laden with salt and other chemicals, especially in the Imperial Valley. So what do? Instead of cleaning up the river and cleaning up the water supply, no, we decided to genetically modify alfalfa so we can grow in saltier soils. It's all about how we manipulate not only the gene, but how we manipulate people into believing certain things are good. And I have a background in genetics. I went to school, in college I went for molecular biology, and I have a background in genetics. So don't boo, but one of the reasons I left was because at the time, most of the research that was going on in New Jersey at Rutgers was being controlled by big pharma and agribusiness. You go to Cook College and at the wall it's Kraft, it's everybody. It's an Agra, that's who controls. And I was tired of dealing with biostitutes because that's really what was happening. And it's one of the reasons I got also active in politics. I've been active politically since I was a kid, and I've been active environmentally since I was knee-high. My parents were avid hikers and outdoors people and that. So when I look at GMOs, yes, there are health impacts, there are societal impacts, but also a tremendous amount of environmental impacts, because when they modify these plants to be resistant to certain pesticides, and if these pesticides get overused, they end up in our drinking water. They end up in the ecosystem. You know, why are frogs disappearing? Well, a lot of people believe it's because of all the chemicals like Roundup that we're doing. What's happening with bats, which is a big part of our ecosystem? Again, trace it back to those pesticides, the overuse of fertilizer, the impacts that has on our water. So for us, we see this as a real part of the overall picture that's happening in the earth. It's not isolated to GMOs. It's that GMOs and the big business interests that promote them are also promoting these large-scale industrial monocultures that take over our landscape and our habitats. And that the chemicals that they're using has a dramatic impact on public health, on water supply, and on the environment. We also are really concerned that these frankenplants that they're putting out there start spreading, and they have impacted other farms, and other people can talk about that. But even something, and I'll use where there's a good. So again, you hear the techno people say, well, if we can grow switchgrass and genetically modify it, we can grow it anywhere, and we can use alcohol from it, so we don't have to have corn ethanol, and then we can power automobiles. No, we don't need switchgrass taking over the pampas in South America. We don't need them taking over the Great Plains. Go buy a plug-in and get a solar panel. I mean, that's the point. You have to look at you can't look at things in a vacuum. You have to look at everything as connected. And to us, we see natural resources being used up by these people. And we see the toxic waste and the impact that has to the environment. For a lot of these companies, I worked for a U.S. Senator many years ago, and he said to me back then that it's not how well you farm the land, it's how well you farm the government that counts. And another big part of it is the subsidies that they get, whether it's for growing soy or growing corn. It's the use of the feedlots to then produce more and more cattle, which has another big impact on climate change and global warming and the environment. And it's this whole concept that we have taken what was supposed to be a productive farm like John Muir's, and instead we've turned it into this not only industrial monoculture, but these people aren't farmers. They're chemists, they're bioengineers, they're everything else but it. They sit in their giant combines with their DVD players going and listening to music as they have these these giant machines going over the landscape. They're not connected to the environment. They're not connected to the food they produce. It's no different than a GM assembly line. And we see the impact of that too, because again, a lot of the foods that are genetically modified for feedlots go into another big problem that we see, which are combined area feed operations, where we stick 10 million pigs in a warehouse and wonder what happens to all that waste, and then of course you end up with dead zones in Pimlico Sound. And that, again, because it's all connected. We look at the whole life cycle of plants. These plants are designed not to reproduce, so you buy more seed. It's all about the bottom line. It's not about agriculture, it's about greed and corporate interest. And for too long, government has walked hand in glove with that. And it's the same government that protects agribusiness and GMOs, that protect corporate polluters and who are dumping toxics into our rivers and streams, protect the development interests that are paving over our landscapes, causing more pollution. It's all connected. And I think that's the part that you also have to realize, that it's just not your one issue. It's every issue is connected, and this is part of that symptom of corporate power destroying our environment. I don't, it's also interesting because, again, you have the other side that says, well, we can do good things with it. The problem is that maybe you could, but the structure of greed that we've put into the farm market and has destroyed whatever positive benefits we might be able to get out of genetic modifications. By the way, last night my wife and I went out to dinner and we had some genetically modified salmon. And it really tasted delicious. It tasted just like chicken. And I think that's the point. It's about people who don't want to work with nature, they want to destroy nature. And this is part of it. Thank you.
Farming Association of New Jersey, otherwise known as NOFA New Jersey, which is an organization that is dedicated to supporting organic and sustainable food, farming, and gardening in New Jersey through education, technical assistance, and policy action. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. So I was asked to come and talk about GMOs and how they affect our farmers. One of the ways that we've talked about, some of this has all come up already, so one of the ways that it's really hurting our farmers is the contamination of our seeds, especially corn, that pollinates through the wind. So if there's a GMO field that's growing GMO corn, and there's an organic farmer, half a mile away, if they all tassel at the same time, that organic farm can be contaminated with that GMO pollen. And how that hurts us is because if they could lose, they could lose their certification. And once it's contaminated, that corn can't be sold as organic. Or it's not only the organic farmer, it could be a farmer that's choosing to just grow non-GMO corn. This hurts our markets. This happens with wheat. It happens with alfalfa. Could happen with soy. Last year, I think it was wheat that got contaminated, billions of dollars worth of exported grain that would have went to Japan. So we lost over $1 billion just in export because it contaminated. And this was a strain that was actually never approved to go to market. It was a test field that contaminated another field, and it ruined our export. Many grain buyers reject loads of crops that have more than 0.9% of a GE presence in it. Estimated loss from contamination is $40 million annually to non-GMO farmers. That's a lot of money. The European Union banned U.S. corn imports, costing U.S. farmers $300 million because they tested their grains of corn and found out that they were too contaminated, and it's not allowed in Europe. It also affects our seed purity. So once you get contamination in an organic seed or a non-GMO, cornfield, that seed is now contaminated with, actually it's a licensed patent. And farmers could actually get sued from Monsanto, if they're the one that sold them, but for the company that created that patent. So that a farmer can actually get sued for now having a contaminated field. So not only do they lose all of their crop that can no longer be sold to market, but they can get sued by the company for unintentionally growing that corn. So difficulty securing the organic or non-GMO grain to feed animals for a natural food market. We talked about alfalfa can get contaminated, but right now our farmers are finding it so hard to get non-GMO seed for chickens, for beef, because most of your cattle, your pork, they all eat the grain, they eat the GMO feed. It could be alfalfa, it could be corn, but once it's eaten, then that goes to market. But if you want grass-fed or an organic meat or a natural meat, you cannot feed it the GMO grain, and so many grains are getting contaminated, there's not enough supply of pure, clean grain anymore, so we can eat that. And if they come out with the GMO grass, now we have to be concerned about our grass-fed animals as well being contaminated. Also spraying of toxic pesticides, which came up a couple different times. But for farmers, if you're an organic farm or non-GMO farm and you're spraying your field, that wind can take over and contaminate the organic field right next to it, and it could ruin that crop as well. And with the GMO crop especially, they use more powerful or more Roundup or glyphosate. They use more and more of it because of the tolerance that we've talked about. And now they're talking about putting the 2,4-D on our crops as well, and to take control of those super weeds that are happening. And if that happens, that can wipe out the farm next year as well. We talked about losing its certification. The seed supply, due to major consolidation of all the seed companies, the seed industry farmers are already facing the loss of tried and true non-GMO varieties from their seed dealers, not only organic varieties, but non-GMO varieties. Because our seed companies have come together, and there's less and less varieties of seeds available, especially our heirloom varieties or even the Jersey tomato. Some varieties are so contaminated they're not available anymore. The threat of seed piracy laws from unintentional growing the patent seed could face lawsuits by biotech firms. There have been a lot of farmers that have been sued by Monsanto and other companies for unintentionally growing it. We talked about the salmon, which is, if you consider that farming. So the GMO salmon, the genetically modified salmon that's coming in to market, it is much larger. It's a crossbreed with another whitefish and an eel. And it does provide, I would say 2 or 3 times the food, the size of it. But the problem is, if it ever got out into the ocean, where the real salmon is, it would actually consume our actual salmon, and it would change the ecosystem completely. And even the salmon farmers are saying they cannot guarantee that it wouldn't get out. So that's a little bit scary. We talked about the cattle. So a lot of your cattle, if they're doing the feed farms and they're out there, they're being fed the GMO seed. And they're also that other stuff. I don't like grossing one out. So we just have to be concerned about the seed. Right now, the entire burden of contamination from GMO is put on the shoulders of the non-GMO farmer for cross-contamination, for crop insurance. There's no subsidies to help the organic farmer or non-GMO farmer if they do get contaminated and they lose their field or they lose their market because they can no longer sell it. Without strong consequences to the seed owners for contamination, real coexistence at this time is really not an option. We can't coexist without there being some type of reprimand for the person that planted the seed or created the seed for the loss of others. I saw a great article that said the way this law works right now is if you lived in a beautiful white house and your neighbor decided to paint their house purple. And as they were painting it, there was this big windstorm, and all the purple paint came all over and sprayed your whole white house. And then he sued you for using that purple paint for hitting your house. That's exactly how contamination works on a field. And that's exactly how the lawsuits work right now with that GMO patent seed. At stake right now is the elimination of clean food and our rights of farmers to grow non-GMO or organic food for the market, and the rights of consumers to choose not to eat those GMO products. At NOFA right now, we are urging the USDA to set standards under the noxious weed provision of the Plant Protection Act of 2000 to control the economic and environmental harm caused by transgenic contamination of organic, conventional, and non-GMO crops, which means we're asking the USDA to treat this as an invasive plant that can hurt farmers. That hasn't gone anywhere yet, that's our hope. Until mandatory prevention and fair compensation measures are put firmly in place to protect the rights of injured farmers, coexistence is not an option. At stake right now is our public health, our farmer viability, and the degradation of environmental quality.
Thank
that's
you.
all I have.
Thank you very much. So, our last 2 panelists that the Foodshed Alliance has chosen to be on this panel tonight are 2 retailers. Our first one represents an independent retailer, and then the last panelist will be a nationwide retailer. And I think one thing I'm going to listen to, I think as mentioned by Lisa Kelly in her introductory remarks to the retailers, if we won't buy it, they can't sell it. So with that short introduction, I'm going to introduce Hugh Nelson, who's an independent retailer. He heads up Dean's Natural Foods, which has stores in Shrewsbury, Basking Ridge, and Bushy Township. Yesterday, I understand, marked 1 year since his company decided to no longer accept any new grocery items containing GMO ingredients unless the product is organic and or non-GMO project verified. So with that introduction, I give you Dean Nelson.
I'm living proof that what GMOs can do to you, because I'm actually a woman. And I'm 11 years old. South Jersey humor. First of all, thank you for being here. This is a unique opportunity for us because, you know, we've heard a lot of information this evening, but this is a consumer-driven market, and the consumer decides what they want to buy, and the manufacturers and the producers respond to it. So I've always said to people that I've come into contact with, you vote with your dollar and you endorse every time you spend a dollar. So we have a unique opportunity here to change the food system by eliminating the foods that we purchase and supporting organizations that we know are doing the right thing. So I consider, I'm not an optimist or a pessimist, but I consider this a tremendous opportunity because unlike other causes that each and every one of us may have, this is one that we can clearly change by deciding how we want to spend our dollars. And education is the real key here, understanding what companies are manufacturing things and what companies are doing the right things. So I would urge all of you to support organizations that are doing the right thing. So the non-GMO project was mentioned a few minutes ago, and that's their logo. If people don't know it, it's on the bottom here. So that's the non-GMO project, and they're a great organization. They were started by 4 young people under the age of 30, and they now have 15,000 items that have been verified, non-GMO verified. If that logo isn't on there, then it's not considered a GMO verified product. There's 1,500 manufacturers that are representing that, and now about 1,000 products a month are being verified by the non-GMO project. So I'm kind of looking at this from the inside out and saying, being involved in the industry nationally, there's tremendous positive changes that are occurring. I believe that this is a one battle over time because the consumers are asking for it, and with our purchasing power and with the influence of retailers like Whole Foods and independents like myself, we can influence the food chain. So I was asked to talk about how I have benefited or not benefited, my company has benefited or not benefited. So the GMO movement has been a very positive investment for us because it has allowed us to influence change and awareness as to what you as consumers purchase and therefore what manufacturers produce. And the point was made, if you're a loyal supporter of ours and we don't sell it, you can't buy it from us, then we've influenced manufacturing change. So I was out at the Natural Food Convention 2 weeks ago, and this verification symbol was everywhere. And for the people that did not have it, there was a picture of it, and through it said verification in process, because they realized that retailers like myself are really, really serious about this and won't bring these products in. And at the end of the day, it's the dollar that really matters, and that's why this is really being leveraged. So if you